Note, the following program is a Springer Podcast Network production.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Pro Wrestling Focus. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, their upcoming match for SummerSlam for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. We're also going to be talking about Rhea Ripley and her status as she is dealing with an injury. We're also going to be talking about the return of Baron Corbin to WWE and the also upcoming return of Big Cass. All that and more on Pro Wrestling Focus. Alright, let's get into it. Let's talk about Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. As we know, they will be facing off at SummerSlam. Roman will be defending his WWE World Heavyweight Championship against Seth. And this has been a long-standing rivalry in WWE. It's been going on for 12 years now. You know, as we all know, Roman and Seth broke in together with Dean Ambrose, also known as Jon Moxley, as the Shield, and they ran roughshod over Monday Night Raw for well over a year. And then there was discussions about who would be the one to be the most successful member of the Shield when the group broke up, and who would cause the breakup. And as we know, Seth was the one who pulled the trigger and turned on Roman and Dean, and he broke out on his own. And I think each member of the Shield, Ambrose, Roman, and Seth, have all been pretty successful in the wrestling business. And, with Ambrose, Moxley, whoever you want to refer to him as, he's been successful not only in WWE, but he's also been successful in AEW since he's been a part of that company. And then Roman and Seth have had 2 Hall of Fame careers, pretty much. These guys have main evented WrestleMania. They've been multiple-time world champions. They've done it all. But these two, they're like Rock and Austin, Shawn and Brett. It's just got to that level of intensity when it comes to these two's rivalry. We knew it was going to get back to this point, that Seth and Roman would have a singles feud. They've been at each other's throats over the last couple years in everything. WrestleMania 40, it was intense then when Seth and Cody teamed up to take on Roman and The Rock on night 1. And then Roman and Cody had their epic showdown on night 2. And Seth was pivotal in helping Cody defeat Roman Reigns to win the WWE Championship. And then, WrestleMania 2 years ago, we had the epic triple threat match with Roman, Seth, and Punk, with the inclusion of Paul Heyman. And Paul Heyman helped Seth Rollins defeat Roman Reigns and CM Punk. And it would lead to Seth and Paul Heyman being paired up, which would create the Vision. And, then then months later, that would lead to Seth being kicked out of his own group by Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed. So, and then Seth got injured, came back, settled his scores with the Vision, And here we are now. Seth is once again in the path of the OTC Roman Reigns. And, they keep going back to the chair shot. That's always the one clip that they love to play when it comes to talking about Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, is the Shield chair shot to the back. When Seth betrayed Roman and Dean Ambrose and essentially broke up the Shield. They keep going back to that Roman's never gotten over it. That Seth broke up the Shield. But, this is 12 years here. 12 years in the making. That these two are back at it. It's the visionary Seth Rollins and the OTC Roman Reigns. And to be honest, this might be the last time that we ever see Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins go one-on-one with each other in a big show like this. And this past Monday on Raw, Roman took some shots at Seth. He called him a career number 2, and that he needed his work daddy, Triple H, in order to stay relevant. And that Roman vowed that he's going to close the door on Seth Rollins forever at SummerSlam. And, it was a pretty intense confrontation, which led to Seth dropping Roman Reigns. Because, Seth attacked Roman. And then, Seth called him a piece of shit. And, he ended up dropping him with the stomp. But, you got to be thinking about what's next, because I think the biggest question is, if Roman is going to win, if he is going to beat Seth and continue his title run, will it be a clean victory? Will he have a clean victory over Seth in this match? Because a lot of people are thinking, the Bloodline's going to get involved. The Usos and Jacob Fatu are going to run down and they're going to save Roman and they're going to end up screwing over Seth. And that could happen, but I think a lot of people are hoping for a clean finish in this match. Because if you look back, fact checking here, Roman has not pinned Seth clean in nearly 10 years. Their last major singles match was in the Royal Rumble back in 2022. And that ended in a disqualification loss for Roman. So, yes, will Roman Reigns get a clean win over Seth Rollins here? I hope so. I think that these two are well established. A loss isn't really going to hurt Seth at this point. Seth is a made guy. He's a main event player. I don't think him taking a clean loss from Roman Reigns is going to hurt him all that much. And I would be highly surprised here if Seth beat Roman, actually. I would be very surprised if they went that route. But I'm expecting that Roman Reigns is going to retain the championship here because I suspect that Roman's going to be champion up until WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia. And the biggest question is what happens to the loser of this match. And I'm thinking it's probably going to be Seth here. Where does Seth go from here after he loses to Roman? What is the next direction for Seth Rollins if he loses here to Roman Reigns? Because, he already, ended his feud with Braun Breaker in the Vision. That's over with. So now, where does Seth go from here? Who does he work with after SummerSlam? That remains to be seen. And then if Roman were to lose, which I don't think that's going to happen, I think WWE is pretty committed to the Bloodline storyline, getting that back going and everything. and they wouldn't have put the band back together if Roman wasn't going to stay champion. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Roman is going to lose here, but if he did, then where would he go from here? Would he take some time off? What would happen with Roman Reigns at this point if he were to lose to Seth Rollins? But yeah, that's for Triple H to figure out. But yeah, I'm just wondering where Seth specifically would go from here if he were to lose. And both guys at this point are entering the twilight of their careers. Things are winding down for both of them. And they both have talked about retirement. Seth has acknowledged that he doesn't have a lot of years left, and Roman, he's been already thinking about his plans after wrestling, which, a lot of people suspect that he's going to be in Hollywood. Yeah, he's going to be an actor, much like his cousin, The Rock. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be experiencing an epic. I think it's going to be a great match between these two. And Roman and Seth have always had great matches over the years working each other, and I expect this one to be no different. Before we get back into the action, I want to give a quick shout out to the other show that's on the Springer Podcast Network, and that is the Cody Springer Show. Last week's episode was why we are addicted to our phones, and it's one of the most relatable conversations that I've done in a while. We talk about why it's become so hard to put our phones down and how social media and endless scrolling are changing the way we think, what it's doing to our relationships, our attention spans, and even our mental health. If you ever caught yourself saying, I'll just check one thing, and then an hour disappears, this episode is definitely for you. You can listen to the Cody Springer Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and everywhere you get your podcast. Now let's get back to Pro Wrestling Focus. All right, let's talk about Rhea Ripley because she is injured at this point in time, and she has not been on TV for over a month now. However, she is still currently the WWE Women's Champion. And the word is that she has a slight meniscus tear. And I guess the plan is to keep the championship on Rhea in hopes that she'll be ready in time for SummerSlam. So, yeah, she's doing rehab to try to, heal it in hopes that she'll be ready by the time SummerSlam rolls around. But here's the deal. Like, it's kind of a controversial situation here because, usually if a champion isn't able to defend their title within 30 days, then they're supposed to vacate the championship. But WWE's like, nope, fuck that. Rhea's going to keep the belt. And we're going to hope that she'll be ready in time for SummerSlam. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been complaining about that. And here's the thing. I love Rhea Ripley. I think she's amazing. I think she is one of the top wrestlers in the entire world. And she is just a star. Flat-out star, But, yeah, Rhea is a one-of-one in this business. But I do think that WWE needs to be taking a more serious look at this and what the message it's sending. And basically, like, it's kind of showing favoritism towards Rhea Ripley. Because, if this was anybody else, then WWE would probably make them give up the title. But no, it's pretty much like they're telling people, like, oh, don't worry about Rhea. She'll be back. Don't worry about it. She'll be back. She's going to do her rehab. She's going to be great, and she'll be back in time for SummerSlam. Well, what if she's not? then what do you do? Yeah, because if she's not able to compete at SummerSlam, then WWE might have to do something with the title. You know, they might have to force Rhea to vacate the title at that point, and they have a new champion crowned at SummerSlam. I mean, but I think the perception right now is that, WWE is showing favoritism towards Rhea Ripley, and if this was anybody else, they would be vacating the championship right away. That they wouldn't even, be able to have the opportunity that Rhea has right now. Because with a meniscus tear, I mean, usually, you just do surgery on it and then you're back in a couple months. But, Rhea, I think she even was asked not too long ago, I don't know if this was an interview or something, but she said that the meniscus tear is in a really weird spot and she cannot crouch or move side to side. So, it's kind of a weird injury, but she could end up coming back from it because the injury happened at Clash in Italy when she faced Jade Cargill in a rematch from WrestleMania. And Rhea slightly tore her meniscus during the match. So Rhea has been out this whole time with this knee injury, and yet people are wondering, like, oh, where's Rhea? Why is she able to hold on to the title? And this ain't fair to the locker room. Blah blah blah. But I guess we're gonna have to see what happens when we get closer to SummerSlam. I think the clarity on the situation will be a lot more apparent once we get closer to SummerSlam. But, I can see why people are saying what they're saying. Because it does kind of seem unfair to the rest of the locker room that Rhea gets to hold on to the title even though she's not on TV, not defending it, and it's been more than 30 days. But I also understand WWE's perspective. They just don't want to yank the title off of Rhea, if she's able to go by the time SummerSlam rolls around. Because I guess the original plan for SummerSlam that I heard was that Rhea was going to defend the title against either Alexa Bliss or JC Jane. Now, her and Alexa, that'd be a good match. That'd be interesting. I would love to see that. And then JC Jane, I think it might be a little too soon to be throwing JC Jane in the title picture, because her and Fatal Influence, they just got on the SmackDown not too long ago. Let's slow roll them a little bit. Let's not do too much too fast with these girls. Let them, develop. Let them get better and more over on TV with the crowd, and then go from there. So far, they got pretty good momentum coming out the gate, but now their momentum is starting to cool a little bit. But I do think that the appropriate course of action would be for Fallon Henley and for Lainey Reed to capture the women's tag titles, and then JC Jane gets a run with the women's United States Championship. That's the direction I would go in. And then if you're still going to keep those three together, then you could probably elevate JC Jane as a contender for the women's championship. But we'll see what happens here with Rhea, and I do think that the situation with her in the title will become more apparent as we get closer to SummerSlam. Before we get back into the show, I want to tell you about something brand new that's coming soon from the Springer Podcast Network. It's called Creepy AF, a brand new horror fiction podcast where every episode tells a terrifying story grounded in reality. No ghosts, no monsters, just the kind of horror that could actually happen, and that's what makes it so unsettling. If you're into psychological horror, true-to-life suspense, disturbing twists, and stories that'll have you checking your locks before bed, then Creepy AF is for you. I'm not announcing a release date just yet, but trust me, you won't want to miss the very first episode when it drops. Make sure you're following the Springer Podcast Network on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble so you know the moment that Creepy AF premieres. Alright, let's get back to Pro Wrestling Focus. Alright, let's talk about Lyra Valkyria. As we know, she turned heel and turned on Bayley. They were a part of a tag team, and Lyra turned on Bayley after they failed to win the tag team titles a couple weeks ago. And ever since then, Lyra has undergone a pretty crazy character transformation. She's been like wearing grungy clothes, and she looks like a crackhead. Okay, I can't just sugarcoat it here. Lyra looks like a crackhead. Like I do not. I mean, okay, we're early in this character change, so I can't go total nuclear on it and say it's not working. We got to give it time before we can, outright judge it and say, okay, this shit's not working. We have to give it some time and see how it plays out. But man, this is not what I envisioned for Lyra at all as a heel. Because I kind of, thought that, they would like, have her kind of have a more serious approach, to her heel persona, but I was not expecting her to look like a full-on crackhead. But man, just that promo on Raw with her and Bayley, I was just like, wow, like Lyra looks terrible. I mean, the promo work, was solid, because Lyra, I think she's always been a solid mic worker. She's been capable of showing charisma and, showing that she can talk and everything like that. But man, on Raw this past Monday, like she just looked like it was just jarring for me, because, Lyra Valkyria, she's a great talent. She really is. She can go in the ring. She can put on a great match. And, I do think that, the SummerSlam match with Becky Lynch last year is kind of what, put Lyra on this downward trend because of the zip tie spot, which that whole thing was messy to begin with, and, I think WWE overproduced that match, if we're being completely honest. And I don't think Lyra should have been put in that position, honestly, because the whole thing was just messy. It really was. And while I thought it was a good match, it was that kind of stuff that prevented it from being a great match. But I don't think it was Lyra's fault, honestly. Yeah, she's the performer. She's expected to go out there and execute everything, flawlessly, and, that didn't happen. But at the same time, I don't think that she was put in the best position at the same time. But, of course, management, creative, backstage, they're not going to take the blame for anything, because they're like, oh, well, we come up with the ideas, we expect everything to be executed to perfection. But yeah, and now we have this drastic character change for Lyra. And, the sentiment is that, they're trying to strip away, this perception of Lyra, like, oh, she's only a good wrestler. She doesn't have the character work or the charisma or, like a character that you can buy into. So now they're doing a complete 180 here, but I I don't know if making her look like a crackhead is the answer. I honestly don't think it is. But again, it's early. We need to see how it plays out. Maybe, we're on to something here, something huge with this character transformation here that we're seeing from Lyra Valkyria. But, we're just going to have to see what happens here. I think her and Bayley are going to have a match at Saturday night's main event. So I don't know. Maybe they'll have Lyra do some crazy shit. I don't know. We're just going to have to see what happens. But so far, not really digging what they're doing. Let's talk about Baron Corbin, because Baron Corbin made his return to WWE on SmackDown last week, and he attacked both Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams, and he's going to be going by the Nomad. But, let's go back and talk about Baron Corbin's history a little bit, because, he was in WWE for quite a long time during his first run in the company. He started in NXT, worked his way up to the main roster. Corbin held several championships. He was Money in the Bank at one point in time. And Corbin, Corbin's underwent a lot of different character transformations during his first run with the company. He was the Constable at one point, and then he was, he was a complete fucking mess at one point in time. He let his hair grow out. He was just looking like a shell of his former self. And then he was demoted to NXT at one point in time, and he had a good run down there in NXT. He was putting on good matches with guys. He had that good run with Braun Breaker, and when they were a tag team, the Wolf Dogs. And then Corbin went back to the main roster, and he got basically phased out of the company because, they were looking to cut contracts, and Corbin was one of those guys that was an unfortunate casualty of that. So Corbin went on the independents. He went under the name of Bishop Dyer, and then that's when he had the Nomad persona. He went to MLW. He was in a tag team with Donovan Dijak. They were known as the Skyscrapers. They held the MLW Tag Team Championships for over a year. And now Baron Corbin is back in WWE. And he's going to be referred to as the Nomad. So he's pretty much carrying over his independent persona back into WWE. But to be honest, I kind of feel like, we're going to be seeing kind of, people are going to be seeing Corbin as the same guy that he was before he left the company. And I know people have been excited as hell about the prospect of Corbin and Braun Breaker reuniting as the Wolf Dogs. They're like, oh my God, we got to have the Wolf Dogs again. I don't think that's ever going to happen because Braun Breaker is in a different position in his career as of right now. He's looking to take that step into the main event scene, and for him to go back to being in a tag team with Baron Corbin would only slow his progress. No offense to Corbin, but Braun Breaker is meant to become a main event level star. He is going to be a future world champion, and I think people need to, understand that. Him and Corbin, they were a great tag team in NXT as the Wolf Dogs. They were put on great matches. They worked great as a team, but they're in two totally different spots right now. Corbin just returned to the company while Braun Breaker is looking to break into the main event scene and become a future WWE World Champion. But yeah, Corbin, he's in the United States Championship picture. He made that very clear that he's gunning for Trick Williams' title. And with Corbin, I do think that his role is mainly going to be to putting the younger talent over. So, yeah, guys like Trick Williams, Ricky Saints, he's probably going to be used as kind of a stepping stone on the roster. He's going to be, a guy that's going to help elevate the younger talent into, helping getting them more over. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to see Corbin back in WWE, but I just know that's probably what his role is going to end up being. All right, let's talk about Big Cass, because apparently he is on his way back to WWE. He's been in AEW for a couple years as Big Bill. As most people know, his real name is Bill Morrissey. But yeah, Big Cass, he has not been in WWE since 2018. And, going back to that time, Big Cass looked like he was destined to be a future main event player. He looked like a guy who was going to become a future world champion. He had the size, he had the look and everything. But, Big Cass, he had issues back in 2018 that led to him being released by the company. And it all started when he was on SmackDown, and there was a segment involving a little person dressed as Daniel Bryan, and Big Cass went off script, went against Vince McMahon and the producers, and he brutally beat the little person past the planned script. So, that was the first strike against him. And then the second strike is when he caused a massive scene on the European tour when he ripped the door off of a production bus while drunk due to a personal dispute. And then he was just, drunk all the time, and management just deemed him to be heavily unreliable. So they let him go, and he was going through a lot of personal issues at that time. He was having depression, and he was self-medicating with the alcohol and everything. And yeah, he was just going through a lot of personal stuff at the time, and he was his own worst enemy, if we want to think about it. But he was able to turn his life around, after he was released by WWE. He linked up with Diamond Dallas Page. He was doing the DDP yoga. He got himself completely sober, and he began his transformation. He got himself back in shape. He went to Impact Wrestling, and then he would later sign with AEW in 2022, and now he is on his way back home to WWE. Now, a lot of people are wondering if Enzo Amore will be joining him. And now Enzo has had his own complicated history as well, because as we remember, he was fired from the company for the rape allegations that were against him. And yeah, Enzo's had a checkered past as well, and he's been on the indies for several years now, grinding it out. And he's been known as Real One. But yeah, we've seen Enzo's name being linked to WWE over the last couple of months. So we might be getting a potential reunion here of sorts for Big Cass and Enzo Amore. As we know, they were a popular tag team in NXT. They came up to the main roster together. And, they had Big Cass turn on Enzo. And then that's when they both went their separate ways. And then Enzo got relegated to being a part of the short-lived Cruiserweight division while Big Cass was being pushed as a singles guy. So, but yeah, we could be seeing the reunion here of Enzo and Cass, because I think that's what people are really excited to see. You know, that's what people want to see. They want to see these two back together as a team, as a pair. And because I don't think the hype will be as big for Cass if he just comes back as a singles guy. You know, I do think the bread and butter here is going to be Enzo and Cass back together once again and doing their shtick like they did before. How you doing? But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Cass makes his return. It'll be on the August 3rd edition of Raw. So, yeah, we'll have to see what happens in less than a month from now when he makes his return, and we'll probably get more vignettes of that are probably going to show a preview of what's to come for Big Cass, and then maybe they'll start teasing Enzo in the vignettes as well. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But yes, Big Cass is on his way back to WWE. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. I'd like to thank you guys for supporting Pro Wrestling Focus, which is a part of the Springer Podcast Network. And I will be back next week with an all-new episode of Pro Wrestling Focus. So until then, watch wrestling and stay focused.